Hello friends, here is the daily news analysis of the Hindi newspaper presented to you by Shiksha IAS Academy. The date 18/4/2018. See, the first topic we are going to take up is that of the Law Commission favouring simultaneous elections. This has been in the news for quite a time now. So the Prime Minister had at one point said simultaneous elections would be really favourable for the Indian setting, in the sense that it would bring down the cost of election quite a lot. Secondly, it would be great for the governments to work through, and the people in the government could focus on governance rather than rallying around the point of election all the time. So why is this in news again? The Law Commission has said that it's a good thing if we go ahead with the simultaneous elections. In this regard, a draft white paper was released by the Law Commission of India recommending of the holding of simultaneous elections to the Lok Sabha and the assemblies possibly in 2019. So it would need an amendment to the constitution to realize this objective, of course. The Law Commission is the government's highest law advisory body. It is headed by, as of now, by the former Supreme Court Judge B.S. Chauhan. The white paper would be circulated to constitutional experts, academia, political parties, bureaucrats, students, etc. for their input. And if there is a change which is to be made to the draft, the changes would be considered by the Law Commission. Simultaneous elections were held in the country during the first 2 decades after the independence up to 1967. Dissolution of certain assemblies in 1968 and 69, followed by the dissolution of Lok Sabha, led to the disruption of the conduct of simultaneous elections then. So since then we have not had the simultaneous elections. So what are the recommendations which the Law Commission makes when it comes to the simultaneous elections? Of course, some changes are to be made. The leader of the majority party would be elected as PM or the CM by the entire House for stability. Of course, that's how it is going on. In case a government holds midterm, the term of the new government would be for the remaining period only. That is to say, if a government has completed 2.5 years and midway it falls, elections would be conducted and the new government which comes to power would have only 2.5 years more in office. After which, the simultaneous elections would kick in alongside the Lok Sabha election. There would be a no confidence motion against the government. Yes, there would be, say. However, it would also be followed by a confidence motion, of course. So these are the key recommendations made, and the details await as more and more ink is spent on this particular topic. The second topic we are going to take up is, of course, the editorial part. Chasing the monsoon. So how monsoon is working its way in India, and secondly, how people are working with monsoon. Are they managing the monsoon well, or are they managing the water resources well in the face of monsoon, a good monsoon? The Indian Meteorological Department, which puts out the forecast of the monsoon, has said it would be normal this year. This is really a great relief for the farmers especially. This is the 3rd year in a row where we can look forward to a higher output in a variety of crops. However, the fiscal realities have come in the way of realizing higher farm incomes. This has led to farm distress, of course. The centre has been supportive of higher returns to minimum support price mechanism, and additional bonuses have been provided by certain state governments, especially Madhya Pradesh. So when it comes to the water management part, from the water management perspective though, this trend has led towards these crops, especially rice and wheat, which are highly dependent on groundwater. So now that another year of good cropping is expected, unremunerative prices, excess production of the same type of crops would only lead to depression in the public sentiment. It is vital for the center to arrive at a policy that gives constructive advice to the farmers on the ideal cropping mix and help them out, getting that cost plus 50% margin that is promised, by the government. This is the MSP that has been promised, cost plus 50%. So the IMD's decision to provide a more fine-grained forecast on the monsoon's progress, particularly in the central and northern regions, will meet a long-felt need and can potentially guide the farmers better. So if the IMD gives, a rather refined picture as to how the rainfall would fare in the present year, the states in the central area and the northern areas would plan accordingly and probably would try to cultivate only those crops which are really commensurate with the rainfall they get. So how do you utilize the rainwater? The long-term challenge is to make the most of the rainfall that India gets. The master plan for this artificial recharge to groundwater drawn by the center should be pursued scientifically to help the states with the most water-stressed blocks get adequate funds to build artificial recharge structures. This is one area which has been quite, disregarded or ignored for quite a while now, where the artificial recharge of groundwater is really important, as most of the water for cropping does come from the groundwater itself. Until and unless you do the artificial recharge of the groundwater, you wouldn't be able to cultivate the crops, or even the drinking water becomes rather scarce. Moreover, for those farmers who chose to continue with wheat and rice, a transfer of expertise and provision of equipment that enables efficient utilization of water is vital. Here we are talking about drip irrigation and the machinery and the sprinkler irrigation. So different methodologies and mechanizations are available in order to cut down the water wastage. So that would be really important. Funding of these programs is of utmost importance as of now. Combined with the distortions in procurement subsidies, water stress due to such use is inevitable. What does this mean? It means to say that over subsidization of certain crops, especially the water guzzling crops like your wheat and rice, would only mean that people get subsidies for this, they get the MSP for this, and because of that they are assured of prices, so they would cultivate them for sure. So if they are cultivating these crops, more water is being used. So such distortions in procurement subsidies would lead to water stress inevitably. That's what it means. On the monsoon as a whole, studies indicate a change in the pattern since 1950. There was an increase in the daily average rainfall since 2002, barring some of the worst El Nino years. You must be knowing what is El Nino. Clearly, the governments need to invest consistently to harvest the monsoon, both on the surface and underground, with community participation. So, despite the average rainfall having increased over the years, we have not been able to conserve the water properly. We have been seeing year on year the water scarcity gets worse and worse. In fact, it had to, the water scarcity had to go down at least by a bit, or at least remain the same. But the water scarcity is deepening despite the increase in daily average of rainfall. So somewhere the government is missing a point. So community participation becomes important in this respect when it comes to water conservation, as it is a global good. So we have to the government has to bring in the community and educate the community about water conservation, and funding is another aspect which needs to be taken into consideration while conserving the water and the schemes thereof. Right. The next editorial piece is Clamor for Death. So this is in the context of an 8-year-old girl who had been raped and murdered. So it's a horrific sexual crime. Every time such a horrific sexual crime hits the headlines, uh, just like this one from Jammu and Kashmir, there is clamor all around prescribing death penalty for such offences. In fact, the Union Ministry for Women and Child Development has come out in open and said that the POSC Act of 2012, that is the Protection of Children from Sexual Offences Act, to provide death penalty as a maximum punishment for the rape of those below 12. So, jumping to conclusions or inferences and making decisions would not be, rather good in for the future, of course, future of the country. Why is it so? It should be a well thought out process. So the anger, the angst expressed by different sections of the society and most of the people, or so as to say, every person in India, every sane person in India, is quite understandable. But the legislation, when it is being brought out, has to be a well considered exercise, and it should not be a response and a sense of outrage over particular incidents. The last time such a ghastly incident happened was in 2012, and a legislative change was brought in as late as 2013. So that set of recommendations to criminal law was a structured response and largely based on recommendations of committee of eminent jurists headed by Mr. J.S. Verma. So the report had argued against the death penalty. It took into account the possibility of awarding life sentences without remission. That is, you have to give life sentence in such a way that you're not supposed to come out of the jail till that person who was involved in the crime completes the entire term, that is till his death. So, as well as the current thinking in favor of abolition of death penalty, and most of the modern societies or emerging countries, the industrialized or the developed countries, have abolished the death penalty. So, taking these into consideration, Justice Verma Committee had argued against death penalty. So, but in fact, what did the government do? The government took a opposite stance, especially when it comes to the awarding of death penalty. The Criminal Law Amendment Act 2013 set the death penalty for rape in the event of it causing the victim's death or a persistent vegetative state, where persistent vegetative state means the person is alive, so as to say that person is brain dead, right? Is alive, but cannot carry out normal functioning, right? And for repeat, say, the death penalty for repeat offenders. So there is a clear dichotomy of views when it comes to the desirability of prescribing a death penalty. Enlightened public opinion would really not be happy, or so as to say, would not be okay with what is called as retributive justice, where the state becomes vengeful. The state tries to take the vengeance on individual brutality. So they are not okay with such a vengeful state. So this despite the outraged public opinion all over. Moreover, it should not be forgotten that death penalty has never been a deterrent against any sort of crime. So death penalty's results have been rather on the downside. Further, there is a legitimate concern that a country's judicial system has not been consistent awarding the death penalty. So, these are the broad pointers which point to the fact that death penalty is not the right way to go. Then what would be the solution? So, even the Law Commission argues that the arbitrariness, given the arbitrariness of the rarest of rare cases, except your terrorism related cases, in all the other cases it is rather arbitrary, that is deciding rarest of rare cases rather arbitrary. So it will be really harsh on the Supreme Court judges or the judges to accept or ask them to compare the relative merits of rape victims based on their age and choose between death sentence and life. So that would be really problematic. right? Next is, how would you really solve this problem? So lengthy prison sentences constituting both well-deserved consequences for grave crimes and a lifelong opportunity for penitence will adequately meet the ends of the justice. So what would be the solution? Lengthy prison sentences and for grave crimes, lifelong opportunity for penitence. So a person who has committed a crime should express penitence. So till that happens, there is no point in doling out death sentences. So in states rush, when it comes to the states rush, it's about Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, Haryana, and Arunachal Pradesh have sought to amend the law to prescribe death penalty for rape of a minor below the age of 12. So they are rushing, and now, given this case, even the center might be rushing. However, it would be rather prudent for the center to take a step back, constitute a committee, and go into the details of acts which are existing, and then come up with prudent solutions to prudent measures to tackle this problem. Whether to go for death penalty or not should be based on rational and logic rather than sentiment. Right. The last topic of the day is, of course, WPI inflation eases to 2.47% in March. So inflation based on wholesale prices slipped marginally to 2.47% in March on falling prices of food items, especially vegetables and pulses. Manufactured products inflation, however, has accelerated. So WPI is no more the headline inflation, though it makes headlines. The most important inflation number for the RBI targeting the inflation is the CPI, CPI combined to be more precise. So the WPI is a number which is given every month, right? So the number, the WPI number, wholesale price index, is published by Office of Economic Advisor, Department of Industrial Policy and Promotion, and it has three main components. One is manufacturing, two primary articles, and three is your fuel and power. So the maximum weightage is, of course, given to the manufactured products, and second highest weightage to the primary articles, and third highest weightage, that is the least weightage, is given to fuel and power. So as you know, inflation is calculated point to point. So the March inflation number which has come is against the March inflation number of 2017. So the base year for the calculation of inflation, that is WPI inflation, is 2011-12. So that's about it for the day. We'll catch up with the daily news analysis of the Hindi newspaper tomorrow again. This is on 19th. Thank you. Have a good day.